This next project is called the Gradient Silhouette Project. It's called that because, as you can see, we have different blocks in the background that are filled with a gradient. And then in the foreground, we have silhouette outlines of people in front of it. For this project, you can choose from 2, 3, or 4 photographs where you're going to trace the outline of a figure just like this to create a silhouette. As you can see, all these figures are full-bodied, meaning we can see the hands, the heads, the shoulders, knees, and toes. We want to make sure you can see every part of the figure and that the photos are not cropped or that the figures in the photo are awkwardly posed. It's best to have interesting looking photos for this project. You're probably going to have to take your own photos for this. For this assignment, you're going to be working from your own photography, not from anything that you have Googled. So let's look at a few photos before we get started. This photo, while fun, is not the best idea to use because my arms are crossed and it creates an awkward shape. Same thing with the other teachers who are wearing onesies. This photo is not ideal because I'm sitting in an awkward position that it looks like a curved up ball. This photo is great because me and my family are all holding our arms up and the poses are different and interesting to look at. This photo isn't great because it's cropped. You can't see my whole body. Last, this is a great type of photo to use because the poses are really interesting looking and the figures are separate from one another. So this is the photo that we're going to use for this project. To get started on your gradient silhouette, you're going to open Adobe Illustrator and hit Create New. For this project, you want to always name it with your last name first and then the project name. Make sure that your measurements are set to inches. And the orientation for this assignment should be landscape. So your width should be 11 inches and your height should be 8.5 inches. Then press Create. Once Illustrator opens, let's start with your layers. The first thing we're going to do is rename layer 1 to be your gradient layer. We're going to start by placing the same amount of rectangle boxes as you have photos. So if you've chosen to use 2 photos for this project, then you only need 2 boxes. If you've chosen 3 photos, then you need 3 boxes. And if you've chosen 4, then you need 4. For exact specifications of what size to make your box for each of these options, please see the instructions on Google Classroom. Next, I'm going to make my rectangles so that they are similar sizes and use up a similar amount of space on the artboard. For now, it's okay that they have a white fill with a black stroke. Once you make your first box, you can use your selection tool to copy the box and then paste it to get a perfect replica. As you can see, mine are a little uneven and they're not evenly spaced apart because they're touching in the middle and I want a little bit of a gap. So I'm going to adjust my boxes so that I have the same gap in the middle as I have a border that goes all the way around. Now I'm ready to lock this layer for the time being, create a new layer, which I will name my source image. From here, I'm going to place my source image that I'm choosing to use for this project. I'm going to File and then Place. Then going to click and drag to place my image so that it's an appropriate size. When I feel like I'm in a good place and size with my source image, I'm going to lock the layer by clicking on the empty area on the layer palette and then click the Create New Layer button one more time. Layer 3 will be renamed to be my silhouette layer. Okay, this part is going to be just like our last project that we did on the positive negative space project. I'm going to zoom in on the subject and take my pen tool. I'm going to make sure that my fill is set to none and my stroke should be set to black. Then I'm going to zoom in so I can see to the best of my ability and create a detailed outline of my first figure. Remember that as you are tracing your outline, to place your anchor points very close to one another so you can get as much detail as possible. You should only be outlining the outline of the figure, which means that you do not need to do any interior outlining on the figure, only the outside. When you are almost done, make sure that you connect your points to where you started. If you mess up, you can hit Control Z on your keyboard to go back a step. And if you accidentally ever end your line, just click on the last point that you had, and then you can continue. Once you have your first silhouette, go ahead and swap the fill and the stroke to fill them in. Then start on your next silhouette. By picking a spot and starting to click. Once you've outlined both figures, make sure that the fill is set to black and the stroke is set to none. If you are opting to do more than 2 figures, then go ahead and continue to outline your third and fourth figures as well. Make sure that you always place the photo that you're tracing on the source image layer and your silhouettes on your silhouette layer. If you are using any photos where the figures are creating holes, or what I like to call donuts, please watch the other video that is attached to show you how to move on with those photos. So if your arms are in the air like mine are, you can see there's a donut above my head here. And my dad and brother are both creating donuts with the O's that they're making. The figure of my mom here has no donuts because none of her body parts are connecting. Neither do either of these figures in this example. When you're done with your silhouettes and you're ready to put in your gradients, select the source image layer and go ahead and delete it. You don't need it anymore. Then on your silhouette layer, feel free to position your silhouettes however you want. You can place them to be a little bit closer together or further apart, or even have them overlapping with the boxes, whatever you choose. No one says that your silhouettes have to fit perfectly inside your boxes. However, if you decide to resize them at all, when you're resizing them using the selection tool, please make sure you're holding down Shift so that they are resizing proportionally. if your images are skewed by being too skinny, too thick, or too short, or too tall, you're going to end up losing points. All right, when you're ready, unlock the gradient layer and select your first box. For this, we're going to want the stroke to be set to none and to select the fill. Once your fill is selected, you can click on the gradient icon on the bottom row right underneath in between the solid color fill and the none button. Or you can click on the gradient tool on the toolbar. You'll know it's the gradient tool because it is the rectangle with a white to black gradient inside. When you click on the gradient tool, you should see a gradient box appear. This is going to be your gradient palette, and this is where we edit the gradient to customize it. If you don't see this palette, you can go to Window and then click Gradient. First things first, you get to decide what type of gradient you want to have. Linear means the gradient is going to go from one side to the other. Radial will mean the gradient forms a circular shape. If you choose linear, you can select the angle that your linear gradient goes in. It will default to 0 degrees, which will be from left to right. If you would like to rotate that, you can either click 90 or negative 90 to rotate the gradient. Next, we want to change the colors. We're going to do that using these sliders on the gradient palette. If you double click on the slider, a color bar will pop up. It will default to black and white, so it'll be a little bit boring at first. You'll want to click on the swatches button and then choose any color. When you click on the color palette again, you'll see the rainbow CMYK spectrum at the bottom. This will allow you to customize your color a little bit. If you click on the other gradient slider, you can do the same thing to change the gradient from black and white to any color change you want. Here I'm changing it from purple on the bottom to blue at the top. If you would like to add a change in color, just come up to where the gradient slider bar is, and when you see your mouse change the icon of a mouse with a plus icon, click. This will add another slider onto your gradient slider that you can change so that I can make my gradient go from purple to light blue to dark blue. I can also move that around so I have more purple and less blue. Maybe I want to slide it and then add another gradient slider here and change it to something even a little bit crazier, like orange. Some colors might struggle to blend into one another. Orange and blue are contrasting colors, which means that you might get a gray area in between on your gradient. When you're done with your first gradient, go ahead and apply a gradient to your second rectangle box. It should default to the same gradient you had before. I find that these projects tend to look best if students are willing to play around with their gradients a little bit. But if you would like to keep them more or less the same, you can also do that. As you can see from my example, because my family and I are spelling Ohio, O-H-I-O, I decided to put the same gradient in the background for the Buckeye colors. That doesn't mean you have to have all the boxes be the same gradient. I encourage you to be as creative as you would like. When you're done, you're going to go to File, Save As, and save an AI copy to your digital art folder. Next, you're going to go to File, Save As, and save an Adobe PDF copy to turn in on Google Classroom. And click Save PDF. When you turn in your final project on Google Classroom, you should also include the source image that you use to trace. Some of you may have one, some of you may have more than one. Whatever photos you used for this project should also be turned in along with your original project.